Today's lesson is the world's most magical train trips. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to talk about traveling by train. A lot of us have cabin fever from being stuck at home for so long because of the pandemic, but the world is opening its doors and it's time to head out and do some traveling, so we've got lots of ideas for you. And the idea we're going to talk about today is taking trips on trains. We're going to talk about the world's most magical train trips. Have you ever had a really wonderful adventure on a train, Mike?
Let's see. Well, taking the train around Taiwan is kind of a nice experience. It's very convenient, very fast, not too expensive. But the one thing I don't like is the journeys are quite short. I'd love to go on one of those long train journeys where even you get to sleep on the train. I did that once as a kid, going from London up to Scotland, which was a great adventure. But not really since then, no. I think a long train trip is something that I would definitely be interested in trying out because you get the pleasure of sightseeing, but also you get the enjoyment of just being relaxed and eating your meals on the train. It sounds wonderful, so hopefully this article will give myself, you, Roger, and everyone listening some good examples and maybe even some good ideas for some magical train trips.
Indeed, you can just get on a train anywhere and take a long train trip, but we're talking about some special ones that may require some reservations. And of course, once you take this train trip, you will have bragging rights. Okay, so let's find out what these train trips are. Let's introduce our topic by listening to the introduction here. It's quite short, and we'll be right back to talk about it.
The world's most magical train trips. There's something about traveling by train that always makes a trip a little more magical. But some trains take the experience to another level.
Okay, so here our article begins by saying there's something about traveling by train that always makes a trip a little more magical. I think most people would agree about this. You can always take a trip on a plane, or you can drive in a car or take a bus, but the train is always so magical. It's so relaxing to sit there and look out the window and watch the scenery passing by. It's not the scenery along an interstate highway or a freeway or something like that. You just see other cars and billboards and stuff like that. But if you're on a train, you can see lots of wonderful scenery.
Absolutely. But some trains, it says, take the experience to another level. When we talk about something being taken or going to another level, it's sort of amazingly different, or it's much, much better, you could possibly say, than what you would expect in the average situation. If it's on another level, wow, it's really special. It's really wonderful. It's really, really unique.
Okay, so we'll talk about some of those trips in our lesson today and in our lesson next time. Let's start with the Orient Express. Let's listen to the next part of our lesson now, and we'll be right back.
The Orient Express. One of the world's most iconic and luxurious trains is the Orient Express. This historic train dates back to 1883, when it took royalty and other members of high society across Europe. Today, the train continues to provide a first-class experience with multi-course meals and impressive private suites for overnight journeys. Of course, top-tier service comes with a price to match. The traditional 5-night journey from Paris to Istanbul starts at a whopping $46,000 US.
大家好，第二部分我们看到单字 royalty。这个字是名词，意思是王室成员或是皇族。例如 ，In the past, certain foods were only allowed to be eaten by royalty. 在过去，有些特定的食物是只有皇室成员可以吃的。或是 The royalty vacationed in this extravagant palace during the summer months. 夏季时，皇室在这个奢华的皇宫度假。另外，把这个字字尾的 ty 去掉，就变成了形容词 royal， 表示皇室的或是王族的。举例来说 ，Millions of people tuned in to watch the royal wedding。成千上百万的人收看了那场皇室婚礼。或者 ，Purple was known as a royal color in France。 紫色在法国曾被视为王族的颜色。接着我们看到形容词 whopping， 指极大的或是巨大的，像是 Alice won a whopping settlement in her court case. Alice 的官司赢得了一大笔和解金。或是 This luxury home in the hills comes with a whopping 50-meter indoor pool. 这座山间豪宅附有一个巨大的50公尺室内泳池。另外补充这个字的同义词 tremendous, T-R-E-M-E-N-D-O-U-S, tremendous, 表示巨大的或是极大的。我们可以说 The climb up the mountain required a tremendous effort from the hikers. 攀登上那座山需要登山客费尽心力。也可以说 It took a tremendous effort, but we finished the project on time. 虽然费了很大的功夫，但我们准时完工了。
Okay, so this particular train adventure is called the Orient Express. Orient means the East. Sometimes this part of the world, Japan, China, Korea, etc., is referred to as the Orient. We don't really call it that anymore, I guess, so we call it the Far East. But in the old days, it was referred to as the Orient. But this particular train is not going all the way from Europe to East Asia, to the Far East. It's actually just going to Turkey.
Yes, this is the granddaddy of all the great luxurious train journeys. It says one of the most iconic and luxurious trains is the Orient Express. Of course, it's iconic. It's very famous. I mean, they even have the mystery novel Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, which was made into a movie just a few years ago. So it's very, very famous. If someone said, what's a luxury train journey? A lot of people in the world would probably say the Orient Express than any other. It's famous for its luxury or being luxurious. To use luxurious is basically the adjective form of the noun luxury, and when we're using this word, we're talking first class, fine china, the best food, linen, personal service, champagne for breakfast, you know, all that kind of stuff that you expect to get when you're paying a lot of money for some kind of service. You're expecting luxury or luxurious treatment, and part of the reason this train particularly is so iconic is because of its history. It says this historic train dates back to 1883. That's when it began. If it dates back to this year, then that is the year it began. And at the time, and maybe even now, it took royalty and other members of high society across Europe. It was a fancy train for fancy people. In other words, members of high society would be VIPs, people in government, people in politics, people in royal families, and that is what royalty are. They would, of course, be kings and queens and princesses and princes, but we could also maybe throw in dukes and counts and things like that. If you have a family connection to some member of royalty or some king or queen, then you could also call yourself royalty. So this was a fancy train, as I said, for rich, fancy people.
Well, today the train continues to provide a first-class experience with multi-course meals and impressive private suites for overnight journeys. So still the average person probably cannot afford to take this train, and you might have to have some connections to get tickets for this train. It continues to provide a first-class experience. And of course, if you have a first-class experience, you're going to be paying lots of money for this, and you're going to have connections and things like that. So of course, you're going to be treated like royalty, even though you may not be royalty yourself, but you'll get multi-course meals. Most of us just have a single-course meal, a biendang or something. Here's a paigu fan or something like that, and that's good for us. But, you know, if you're special and you've got time, you can have a multi-course meal with, various things, salad and bread and vegetables all served separately with different silverware. You're really special if you can have a multi-course meal.
Yeah, that would definitely definitely be fancy because most of us, of course, might have a bento box on the train journey or buy a sandwich or a cup of coffee from someone there. But having a multi-course meal just like you would have in a 3-star Michelin restaurant or something like that would be great. And then, of course, after the wonderful meal that you have, you'll have an impressive private suite for your overnight journey. So this is a beautiful room for yourself. A suite is probably a room or two that are connected. So you might have the sleeping area, a small area for sitting or for dining, and of course, an ensuite bathroom, a bathroom attached for your washing needs and things like that. So when we talk about a suite, we're kind of talking about a larger hotel room that might actually be 2 or 3 rooms, giving you the feel of a small apartment or something like that for your overnight journey. So basically the best food and one of the nicest hotel rooms you've ever stayed in with beautiful decorations and all that. And you're on a train. That's what is so fantastic about it. And of course, top-tier service comes with a price to match. Well, yes, you're getting the best food, the best room, the best service. So you'll have waiters and butlers and all sorts of people there to answer your every need. But of course, it will also come with a price to match. In other words, high service, high price.
Indeed. And of course, you want these things to be expensive to keep common people away and to attract only the best people here. So, of course, if you have top-tier service with those multi-course meals and private suites and fine Cuban cigars and stuff like that, well, it's going to cost a lot of money. For example, the traditional 5-night journey from Paris to Istanbul starts at a whopping $46,000 US.
Oh, my gosh.
Which, to Mike and myself, is a lot of money. That's enough to buy a new car. But, hey, we could buy a new car if we buy it with installments, and we need to pay for several years for that. But hey, rich people, to them, this is petty cash. Oh, $46,000. I make that with my stock dividends in a split second every day. So this still is a pretty high price. We're calling it a whopping $46,000 US. Whopping just means it's really, really huge. To most of us, we would probably think, I could never afford that. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's now talk about the GAN.
The GAN. For a train trip full of adventure, book a ticket on the GAN and experience the Australian outback. The GAN gets its name from the Afghan camel drivers who transported goods through the outback in the 19th and 20th centuries. Spanning the entire length of Australia, the railway route includes several off-train excursions. At Alice Springs Desert Park, learn about Australian wildlife or go mountain biking. In the pioneer town of Katherine, take a cruise down the stunning Nitmilla Gorge. And in the opal mining town of Coober Pedy, visit an underground museum or book an afternoon trip to the Cancu Breakaways Conservation Park, a scenic area of richly colored hills.
第3部分我们看到单字 conservation， 这个字是名词，指保育、保护或是节约。例如 In the 1970s, large numbers of people first became concerned about conservation of the natural environment. 在1970年代，许多人开始关心自然环境的保护。或是 This organization raises money to pay for the conservation of historic buildings. 这个组织筹集款项以用于保护历史建筑。另外补充 conservation 的动词 conserve, C-O-N-S-E-R-V-E, conserve, 指保护，像是 Various organizations made an effort to try to conserve the ancient woodland. 多个机构做了努力，试图保护这片古老的林地。最后我们看到形容词 scenic, 指景色优美的或是风景秀丽的。例如 Taiwan has many scenic bike trails. 台湾有许多风景优美的脚踏车道。或是 You'll love basking in the scenic beauty of this mountain resort. 你会喜欢在这个山间度假中心的优美风光中晒太阳的。另外补充这个字的名词 scenery, S-C-E-N-E-R-Y, scenery, 意思是风景或是景色。举例来说 The scenery of the mountains always takes my breath away. 山上的风景总是美丽到令我屏息。或是 The artist spent the afternoon painting the mountain scenery. 那位艺术家花了整个下午的时间画山景。
Okay, so now we're going down under to Australia, and we just talked about the Orient Express there. If you're rich, if you've got a lot of money to burn, you can consider taking this trip. And now we're going to Australia, and we've got a trip there called the GAN. For a train trip full of adventure, book a ticket on the GAN and experience the Australian outback. So if you talk about the countryside in Australia, in the middle part of the country there, between the east and west coast there, you've got a lot of open area there, lots of deserts. That's referred to as the Australian outback. And yes, indeed, if you want to check that out, you should probably take a train because you can look at this place out the window of your air-conditioned train.
It says the GAN, or the GAN, as they might pronounce it in Australia, gets its name from the Afghan camel drivers who transported goods through the outback in the 19th and 20th centuries. What an interesting little bit of Australian history. So back before the train, before the highways, before planes, obviously, when they had to get things across Australia and they didn't want to put them on a boat and sail them around the island or around the country, they brought camels from Afghanistan and camel drivers. That's basically like cowboys, except they ride camels. They're the guys who will lead the convoys of goods across down the Silk Road from India and places like that. So these guys were brought over to Australia to do the same thing, to take their large camels that can travel long distances through dry land and use them in Australia back in the 19th and 20th centuries. So this idea of sort of crossing the middle of the country, well, the Afghan camel drivers used to do it. Now the GAN train does basically the same journey. And yeah, we are talking about crossing Australia. So spanning the entire length of Australia, the railway route includes several off-train excursions. When something spans something, it crosses it. A bridge will span a river from one side to the other. A highway could span the country going from east to west and north to south. It crosses a great distance. It connects two sides of something, in this case, both sides of the continent and country of Australia. And so that's a great way to see the whole country from west to east and east to west. And the railway route, we also read, includes several off-train excursions. So not the kind of trip I think you would want to make if you're on a deadline, if you're rushed for time, just fly from one side of Australia to the other. But if you want to take a little bit of time, see a little bit more of the country, there are these excursions. Think of an excursion kind of like a day trip. It's a little trip. It's further away from your home than you might walk. You'll probably drive or take a bus, and you might get up early in the morning, have your little excursion, and then be home later in the evening. So like a day trip, but a little bit further than you might be able to walk during a day.
Yeah, for example, many years ago, my wife and I took a trip to Beijing, and we took an excursion trip up to the Great Wall and to the Ming Tombs. That was kind of fun, kind of branching out from Beijing. And if you're taking this train across Australia, the train will stop in various places, and you can have these off-train excursions. They'll take you to some local attractions that are near the railway. And let's talk about Alice Springs here at Alice Springs Desert Park. Learn about Australian wildlife or go mountain biking. The wild animals in Australia, of course, they have a lot of different species that you don't see in other places, like kangaroos and platypuses and koalas and the lyrebird and stuff like that. You could check out the wildlife there. Or you could go mountain biking, which sounds like a lot of fun. Take a bicycle that is designed to go over rough mountain trails, and that, of course, can be a lot of fun, but do be careful.
True, but after being cooped up and stuck in a train for a few days, it might be nice to get out there and stretch your legs doing some mountain biking. And there are some other things you can do. This is maybe a little further along in your journey. They have another excursion, another little trip that you can take. As it says, in the pioneer town of Katherine, take a cruise down the stunning Nitmiluk Gorge. All right, I will be sure to do that because I like saying Nitmiluk Gorge. That's kind of a cool name. And this is near the pioneer town of Katherine. As many people know, Australia still has a great history and a great tradition of mining. A lot of gold, diamonds, other precious minerals come out of Australia. And of course, whenever you have a place where people discover valuable things under the earth, like gold and diamonds, you might have a pioneer town. When we think of pioneer towns, we think of those old towns from the past when people, often white people, were in a new area. Could be the pioneers of the western expanses of America or Canada, or the pioneers down there in Australia. And these are the first people who head out into the wilds, head out into the frontier, and they're looking for opportunity. They're looking for gold. They're looking for land. They're looking to cut down forests to make a fortune on selling the wood back in the city. But these pioneer towns are the earliest sort of European settlements in many of these places. So kind of expect it to look like an old cowboy town from a movie or something like that. Very basic, but the first settlers 100, 150 years ago came here to look for valuable things in the land. So you'll do that in Catherine. And then in a nice dry part of the world, it might be fun to take a cruise down a stunning gorge. Because on a cruise, that means you're on a little boat or on a ship of some kind. And a gorge, of course, is like a valley, like Taroko Gorge, a very deep cut in the earth, usually with a river down at the bottom. So it's lovely and it's beautiful because it's stunning. So something that will definitely take your breath away and be worth a few pictures.
Yeah, it's like a canyon, a gorge there. And you could also go to this opal mining town of Coober Pedy. You can visit an underground museum there, or you could reserve or book an afternoon trip to the Kanku Breakaways Conservation Park, which is a scenic area of richly colored hills.
Wow.
So opals, of course, are precious stones, and they come out of the ground there. There's a museum there that is underground. And, of course, you can go to a conservation park, which is outdoors, and it's a wooded area. It's scenic. It's got some great scenes to check out there and take pictures of. And, yes, the hills have different colors. So, of course, you're going to have some great photo opportunities there. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's turn things over now to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分介绍了东方快车，那这个历史悠久的火车至今持续提供一流的乘车体验，为跨夜的旅程提供多道餐点，还有令人赞叹的私人套房。好，文中它用到 multi-course 这个字。Course 当名词呢，它可以指一道菜，像 main course 就是主菜嘛。那么你可以说 a 4-course dinner 就可以表达4道菜的晚餐。那我们现在是在 course 前面加上字首 multi multi 表示多重的、数倍的，构成 multi course 就可以用来描述餐点是多道的、许多道的这样子。好，那这边我们来补充一下字首 multi multi 或者是念作 multi 它的相关单字。好，那么 multi 这个字首它表示许多啊，两个以上或者是好几倍，像 multiple 它就是有 multi 许多，再加上 ple 表示折叠、重叠，把它组合在一起 multiple 就可以表达多重的、多种的或是多个的意思。其他还有像是 multicultural 表示多元文化的， multicolored 表示多彩的、多种色彩的， multimedia 多媒体的， multipurpose 多功能的、多重用途的，还有像 multinational 就是跨国的、多国的， multilingual 则是可以形容是能通多种语言的、使用多种语言的等等。好，那么课文第3部分它介绍了干号列车。这个段落呢，它是有推荐一些行程，而其中一个是保育公园。好，这边用到 conservation 这个名词就表示保育、保护，它是来自动词 conserve。那我们来学习它的字首字根。好 ，serv 这个字根，它表示保存啊、服务，还有那种留意、确保安全的意思。像 service， 它不是有服务效劳的意思吗？那它就是由 serv 再加上抽象名词字尾 ice 而来的。 那么在 conserve 这个字当中，它的字首 con 是做强调用 ，serve 表示保存。我们去强调保存的重要性，应该很容易联想到 conserve 它有保存啊、保育或是保护的意思。顺便补充2个有相同字根的单字，第一个是 observe， 它的字首 ob 表示在点点点的上方，那么字根 serve 表示看管、留意。如果有人在上方随时留意周遭动态，应该不难联想到 observe 这个动词，它有观察、观测或者是监视的意思。第二个补充的是 deserve， 它的字首 de 表示完全，那么字根 serve 表示服务。Deserve 这个字原本其实是指因为服务周到、热心服务而被授予某一种权利，后来才延伸出那种应得、值得的意思哦。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Luxurious. 3 luxurious couches were positioned around the rug in the living room. Royalty. The event was attended by government officials and royalty. Suite. We booked the most expensive suite in the hotel for our honeymoon. Span. The stage spanned the entire width of the stadium. Wildlife. You can take photos, but please do not get too close to the wildlife. Pioneer. The pioneers worked hard to transform the plains into farmland. Cruise. The couple went on a 1-week cruise down the Nile River in Egypt. Conservation. The conservation of forests is that environmental group's top priority. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.